You know what? Your Java application is just fine until it grows fangs. Do you remember this moment of realization? I can't comprehend my whole application anymore. What should I do? And obviously you had this lamp going off. I should split it into microservices. Or probably it was a little bit different. I have to architect my application into microservices. You shouldn't. Please don't. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Pasha. I work for Bellsoft, and I spent at least 6 years building and architecting systems in microservices. It was not the worst time in my life, but probably it was not the best decision, and probably it's not the best decision for you too. Let me explain why. Did you already see this image? On the one side, it's Monolith. It's one big pile of chocolate ice cream. And the other side is microservices. And it's still piles of chocolate ice cream, but more and smaller. You might see it's just a joke, but actually, when we start separating our monolith in smaller microservices, our only goal is to make our code bases smaller without solving architectural issues. When you ask people, what was wrong with your monolith? You usually hear one of two things. First, my monolith is legacy monolith, it's just a big ball of mud. Second, my monolith is hard to scale. Let's cover them both. If you just split your big ball of mud into smaller balls of mud, it's still mud. It won't solve any of your problems. And if you're talking about scaling, what are you even talking about? What stops you from deploying your software monolith in multiple pods in your Kubernetes, in multiple virtual machines, anywhere? Good applications should scale horizontally, and if it can't be scaled horizontally, microservices won't solve your problem at all. The problem I saw with microservices many times is they're actually just a distributed monolith. They can't work without each other. They're interdependent. They have loop dependencies. You can't deploy one without deploying another. It is not microservice or monolith problem. It's a mindset problem. Because if it was a big ball of mud, microservices will also be big ball of mud. So stop lying to yourself. It's not about monolith versus microservices. It's about chaos versus order, chaos versus structure, if you will. Imagine that we have this huge mega corporation which can accept orders for something, for, let's say, cyberware, and we want to place an order, and service which is responsible for accepting an order depends on 3 other services: inventory service, payment service, shipment service. Theoretically, it's possible. It's a nice way to write code in a way, but everything is very tightly coupled. And when we place an order, we will have to reserve order and then charge for this order and then ship this order in one function, which is viable but brittle, fragile. But it is how you usually write a monolith, or at least used to write them. But if you think about it, how would you rewrite it into microservices exactly? Probably something like this. Shipment service is a separate service, payment service is a separate service, and you just make HTTP calls to them. Congratulations! You just made the whole thing more expensive to run and actually slower, because inside the process calls cost you essentially nothing. HTTP calls have an actual price in nanoseconds, as well as memory. Now you're running multiple JVMs instead of one. Wow, what a beautiful solution it is! There is one very valid reason to use microservices inside your company, when your development teams can't really communicate with each other. Well, in this case, you probably should separate them in different microservices or something like that, just for them not to communicate, you know? But it's a sad reality. I actually think that good developers are very good in communication, and that's why I won't be talking about this sad side of reality today. And since we are not talking about communication problems, I have a beautiful technical solution for all of your problems. Well, not all of them, you got me. But these big mall of mud problems and fragility problems. It's called Spring Modulith. Spring Modulith is a way to organize monolith right. What I mean by right, that's very simple. We'll just split our monolith in functional modules and we will define boundaries between these modules. And when anything tries to cross the boundary illegally, it will be caught. In our case, it will be caught by tests, which are also a huge part of Spring Modulith. And the important part here is we are trying to avoid direct calls from one module to another when it's viable, feasible and possible. We are trying to use internal Spring event bus. Now, when we are thinking about our order service, it doesn't call 3 things, it doesn't call even one thing, it just publishes one event on order placed, like this. And all the services which are interested in this event will implement something like this on order placed event, and will process it accordingly. It is crucially important to understand Spring Modulith doesn't tell you do not use direct calls. Use them, just be mindful about them. But for example, for the same example with orders, you obviously can't place an order until you know that there is enough stock. So you should totally go and check the stock, and if the stock is not enough, then just throw an exception or whatever your valid business behavior is. What is important here is you write test for it, that your one service, stock service or whatever, can call the DB service layer or DB module layer, but they can't be called vice versa, because otherwise it's again big ball of mud. This is how we do it. The first thing Spring Modulith will test almost automatically, you only need this one line of code, is it will verify that there are no cycles in your dependencies. Second thing it will verify the same way is for each module you should have an API, and it will verify that you're not working with anything outside of this API. And what is even more amazing, you can explicitly define on which other modules your module can depend. And if you do something illegal, you will be caught. Now to the more interesting part of the testing async events. As you can imagine, there are 2 parts in async communication: publisher and subscriber, and we test them both, but in slightly different manner. Both of them are relatively simple. Let's start from publisher. So, to test if our publisher creates an event correctly, we will call our publisher directly, and then we will wait until the event is published, and then we will verify if the event is correct, like this. And for a consumer, we'll do it slightly different way. We'll publish an event, then we'll wait until our application changes state. Then we verify that everything was performed correctly. This way, when we do not have direct call between 2 modules of our application, we still can test the full connection between them. And there are many more options. For example, we can define that we shouldn't wait for the result of an event take more than 20 seconds. And we can verify if an exception was correct in case if there should be an exception. At this point, you probably already realized that the whole thing about microservices versus monolith is about structure, but structure should be enforced. And I should say that it's much simpler to enforce structure with Spring Modulith than in any other way, because it's just a matter of writing reasonably simple tests. And when you have this structure under your control, if one day you realize, wait, this part of my application is an actual bottleneck, you will be able to split it into a separate service and horizontally scale it, and nothing will change for your application, because guess what? It still will be the same asynchronous communication, and no boundaries are broken. And I would even argue the whole developer experience is so much better now. If you need to onboard a new person, Spring Modulith allows you to build an UML diagram of dependencies of modules between each other. So it will be so much simpler for them to understand the flow of the application. Let's make a quick recap. Do you need microservices? I bet you don't, or at least I hope you don't, because Spring Modulith gives you all the beauty of microservices without network tags, and it gives you all the power of Monolith without being a big mall of mud. It gives you a lot of control, and this control is cheap. So the next time someone asks you, do you still like microservices? I hope that your answer is not anymore. If you like the video, like the video. If you don't like the video, leave a comment in the comment section, and who knows, maybe I will fix mistake or answer you. Thank you so much. Pasha out.